Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of Interview with a Reader, and I am here with Jasper. Jasper, thank you for joining me
Thank you so much for having me on. And we've been trying to organize this for
for
months,
a million years.
decades even, since before the dawn of the internet.
Before videos were even happening, we were trying to get this done. It's crazy.
Absolutely. Back when you used to try and interview me with a very long piece of string and a tin can stretched
Well,
right way across the Atlantic Ocean.
well, I'm glad we're doing it now since the quality is probably much better.
Teeny bit better.
Better. So you are a very, very interesting person. I remember the first time I ever saw one of your little videos run across, and I'm like, okay, this guy, I got to check out his books. So I need to know where you get your inspiration from for these books. How do you come up with these ideas?
I have an entire sub basement filled with very small, diminutive people that I have hooked up to electrodes, and I basically just torture them. And it's a little bit like if you gave 1,000 monkeys 1,000 typewriters. If you have 1,000 kind of like mutant, diminutive individuals hooked up to the mains voltage and you torture them, eventually one of them will come up with an idea that's worth exploiting.
I mean, that makes sense. You write horror, and how else are you going to get a good horror story?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely. That's so crazy.
It's worth mentioning that these diminutive people, by the way, do come from the same fat from which my father, I refer to him loosely as father. He was actually like a mad geneticist, actually bred us all. And I was the closest he got to a successful kind of like human experiment. I just was forced eventually to murder him and take over the sub basement. And I thought, do I use these great scientific experiments to better humanity, or do I write just hideous horror fiction? And for me, the choice was quite obvious.
I mean, do you think that that was his goal that this is where you ended up, or do you think maybe he would be disappointed if he was still here?
Oh, I think I'm the sort of person that disappoints most parents, and not even my own, actually.
My goodness. Well, I mean, I think your writing's pretty good.
Well, thank
So,
you. Yeah.
at least one person in the world. I've seen a couple of other ones out in the wild. So tell me, how do you like interacting with your fans? Because you're just so much fun in general. So,
Um, Actually, I love it. And the great thing is it's not so much interacting with other readers, so much as being part of an active community. I mean, you must find this yourself with the Substack that you run with these fabulous videos that you put up. It's connecting with so many like-minded individuals. It's that sense that I am not alone. Strange as I am, unusual as I am, there are other people in the world, even if they don't live in my tiny little town, even if we can't meet up and hang out and have a beer. We can meet online, we can interact, we can write to each other. And some of these people are kind enough to reach out to me about the books that I've written that they've really enjoyed. And there's this interplay with us. They say, "Thank God I'm not the only one who thinks like this." And it is kind of quite worrying that there is a single other human being on the face of the planet who thinks like me. But there are one or two, and they buy my books, and they feel relieved that it's not just a mental illness, that there are other people they can share these thoughts with. Um, so I think, although I'm being quite flippant, and I've been quite flippant so far in the interview, what I'm trying to say is I love interacting with people who have similar tastes, similar thoughts, similar ideas, similar views of the world as myself. And the fact that some of those people happen to read my books and be part of a worldwide community is a fabulous thing, and it's brought so many great things into my life. It's so many recommendations for books and music and films that I wouldn't otherwise have gotten. So many great conversations in person at conventions, or late night chatting, instant messaging, or zooming with people. So that's how I like interacting with people. So it has been an incredibly important part of my life. And anyone who's ever reached out to me, just to say, I read one of your books. and I really liked it, or I've just written a review for you on Goodreads, which is always massively useful, means the world to me. And I know because there's a huge number of people, that huge number of authors I keep meaning to reach out to and say, loved your work. That I'm connected to. So if you've ever like read a book from an author and thought, no, they won't want to listen to someone like me, please let me assure you that it absolutely makes every author's day, and they love hearing from you. Even if you just want to tell them about a misplaced comma or a misused pronoun. It means the world. It really, really does. Please
I
do.
mean, it means that they read your book enough to where they're like, okay, I saw this. At least they're not like, you know what, you missed a comma, but the rest of this book is awful.
Yeah, people want to talk about all kinds of strange things, and I love it. And if you've spotted a mistake or a misnomer or an anachronism in one of my books, yeah, please tell me. I would absolutely do my best to fix it in the next edition, if it means harrying my poor publishers.
What kind of conventions have you went to? Because I could just, that would be so much fun to run into you at a convention.
Oh, I do hope so. Loads of conventions over the years. I mean, we do occasionally get the HWA, the Horror Writers Association, do come on over and host events here in the UK. There's the British Fantasy Society. They do a thing called Fantasy Con, which is absolutely fabulous. We do have super huge Comic Cons, which I also really, really enjoy. But of late, of the past 2, 3 years, my favorite conventions to go to are actually the really tiny little small conventions, things which are put on by like the only like geek in the village who then decides, do you know what? There's probably at least 4 or 5 geeks in every other tiny little village near here. So if I just rent out the village hall for like 3 shekels, then they'll all come. And some of these people convince you to turn up with your books, and you stand there in this kind of creaking old ancient hall, you know, which was thrown up when William the Conqueror first invaded the shores, because that's how old our country is. And there's like the sheeps and things grazing actually in the hall with you, and there's no really toilet. There's just a big hole in the ground, and you turn up with your books and think, oh dear. What we're doing here, and only 5 other people come, but those 5 other people buy every single book that you've brought with you. So, I'm exaggerating just a tiny little bit, but there are a lot of local small conventions which often fly under the radar, and I've had some of the best times over the past um, like couple of years going to those conventions. Big shout out as well also to, and I'm sure many people watching this will have be aware of, for Trish Wilson, who does is an incredible. I believe you've interviewed her. She
Yes.
the indie
Indie horror chapter.
and those are fantastic. Those are events that are purely just for indie horror authors. There is no like kind of like sub pseudo celebrities who once upon a time played like the third guard in a Doctor Who episode in like 1943, who's kind of wheeled out to kind of sign autographs that and photographs that look nothing like them. Like there are horror conventions. There are just horror authors behind tables, and there is the people that go to those conventions bring carts. I'm not kidding you, carts and giant suitcases, so they can go on practically every single author's stand, chat with them, and buy 2 or 3 books off every single author. And you find yourself in the company of people who absolutely adore the same kind of books that you adore. And so the conversations are fantastic. And the other little thing you see is half the people kind of come to every single convention and follow them around, a bit like groupies to a band. And then the other half are the people who've gone, oh my God, I never thought anything like this would happen in my town. And they go,
Yes.
this is so exciting. Somebody's brought this out to this tiny little Canterbury. When did they, and I just stumbled across it. I was going to the shop to buy myself a croissant and horror books. Um, and there's also kind of like a tiny little kind of group of like Gen Z emos who kind of like want to stand right in the
Some of
center
the
hall.
Bobs.
Yeah, and they kind of like they don't want to talk to anyone at the stand, so they kind of just like stand there looking extremely cool and glaring at you if you suggest that perhaps they might want to browse. No, no, talk to me.
No
It's so
thanks, we're just here to learn.
yeah. But anyway, those conventions are superb, and and actually cannot sing Trish's praises highly enough, and also the amazing team that worked with her to put it together, like Rachel Kozlowski, and also Callum and Gemma, who do a superb job and really make all not just all of the authors who come, but all of the people who turn up to these conventions feel so much at home. Um,
All the care and thought that went into that. Like when I interviewed Trish, I was just like, some of the stuff that she thinks about are things that I never would have thought about. And she's already like got it handled, got it taken care of.
Oh yeah, she's absolutely. And the biggest tragedy is the injury like she's done to her knee. Checking out our last venue, unfortunately, so there may not be another one this year, which is that's left a giant gaping like wound-like hole in the indie horror calendar right here in the UK.
It's terrible.
It is terrible.
Well, I hope she gets better. It's just a terrible, terrible thing. We need to get together and like make her a robotic knee situation.
Oh hell yeah. Or one of
Yeah.
those kind of sort of floating anti-gravity platforms which you can like circle around on and probably take over most of the known cosmos as well.
Yeah. It'd have to be solar powered too, because otherwise, gas powered, no thanks.
It's not going to work, is it really? You can make it methane powered. If you feed lots of beans, perhaps you can kind of keep it aloft just by breaking wind constantly, like a hovercraft.
I mean, there's ingenuitive ideas. Other power. Okay, let's see. What else do we want to talk about? Okay, this is a question that I like to ask authors, and I feel like this is going to be an interesting one for you just in general. When did you decide that you were just going to be writing horror? Did you start writing out another genre first? Like, where did, how? Besides being born from a vat, of course.
There are kind of like two answers to this because inter I started out as a in theatre. I left ran away from home, didn't find a circus, ended up working in like theatre as an actor and as a playwright. This was also back in the very late 80s as a teen, and there was actually public money available for arts here in the UK, and they would take ne'er-do-wells who would otherwise be kind of like jacking like hubcaps and kind of like stealing cars, and they would kind of give them a small amount of money and allow them to do something creative, rather than mugging old grannies. Um, and I was lucky enough to fall into that particular category, and
The mugging grannies or getting the grant?
getting the grants, getting the Arts Council money. It kind of worked. Basically, the skills I'd kind of learned, kind of like as a minor kind of hustler and con artist. And sofa surfer was put to good use, getting money out of like local municipalities and arts council boards, which used to exist in this country. And that got me writing for a living, effectively. I mean, a very poor living. And from there, when all that sort of started to fall apart, I discovered the stand-up circuit. I was a performance poet and a stand-up comedian for many years, living a very hand-to-mouth existence. And then when I found myself in serious relationships and had kind of responsibilities like rent and utility bills to pay for, I kind of had to slightly grow up a little bit. And although I had no formal education, I bullshitted my way into being a journalist was pure bullshit and bravado. Kind of similar to you see movies like the Talented Mr. Ripley or the kind of Catch Me If You Can Frank Abagnale. I kind of feel a great deal of sympathy with them because that's how I got a career as a writer in journalism. I just bullshitted my way in, and then by the time anybody thought to kind of check out my references or my kind of resume, I'd done enough work to kind of actually back it up. So if you go back a few years, yeah, that's all bullshit. But from then on, I'd worked in the national press for quite a while. And I segued from that into writing comics. And which was also, again, there was still enough of a comics industry in the early noughties in the UK and also over in Europe to support yourself writing that. But then as that also started to lose money and also to employ less people, I didn't make the jump to American comics like a few of my colleagues did, but I did start getting asked to write novels, and I was very much on a work for hire basis. I would get a very big advance, which would be enough to support me if I could churn out a novel in about 3 months, which I often did. And I would write these novels and also continue to write comics for things like DreamWorks, Disney, and all the different franchises that wanted comics. But I was a bit of a hack, to be honest with you. I would write whatever kind of basically you asked me to write. So I was very much a commercial writer. And I'd kind of gone from being a journalist, which I became dissatisfied with, even though I was in the sexy end of journalism. I wrote about music and I wrote about film and I interviewed kind of some of the world's biggest celebrities. But I was kind of, I wasn't writing things that were very creative. And then I kind of moved into writing things that were slightly more creative. And it was my wife, who occasionally, and by occasionally I mean all the time, has very good ideas. And she did point out to me that it's about 15 years ago that although I'd written that she could point to hundreds of books on the bookshelf and kind of comics and magazines I'd written, she said, I can't point to anything I could point to and say, only you could have written that. This is absolutely 100% your voice. And that was like kind of knife to the heart, like, ouch, I'm a creative artist, I'm a poet. So anyway, but she was 100% totally right. So I went off to dwell on this, and by dwell on this, I mean shut the door to my study and sulk for a few days. Um, but realizing that she was probably right, realizing I was going to have to do something about this, and at the time, what kicked this off was the fact that I was writing game scripts for the world's most impossible client. And if I thought writing stuff that had to be cleared by Hollywood execs was like mind-numbingly just stupid. For instance, I once wrote a Nightmare on Elm Street novel, and the feedback I got from the Hollywood exec was, "We're not sure if we can have Freddy Krueger killing teens because it's an important franchise for us, and we don't think that's kind of like a very positive vibe for him." And I was like, "Have you
Bob?
have you seen a fucking film?" Yeah, and they got also I got writing. I was um, a Fish's Tale, and I've totally forgotten the name. It's the Disney Pixar film with Will Smith and Robert De Niro. It starts with the car wash. Um,
I know what you're talking about, but I can't remember the name.
Neither can I. Yeah, they objected to a script I had in that because I was showing all the fish as African Americans and I was showing all the sharks as Italian Americans, and they thought that kind of and I was also showing there's a little bit kind of mafia, and that might actually be a bit that might actually um, alienate like certain part of their readership. And I was a bit like, have you seen the film? I mean, have you actually do you know who does these voices? It was, but anyway. That was as nothing as working in the games industry, and I'm trying very, very hard there to kind of not to drop an F-bomb. Yeah, that was just impossible. And but forward, you might notice there's a few grey hairs. All of these came from writing for effing games executives who were clueless. So, and this was the point at which I was kind of at a wit's end, but they were paying me huge sums of money, and my wife was like, "Well, why are you doing this? What is the point?" And I was going, "Money," and she was like, "But that's not a reason." And I mean, this is how awesome my wife is, really. So after I'd had my sulk and realized that she was perhaps suggesting that she might take on a few more of financial responsibilities in order to allow me to write something great. And by write something great, that kind of means kind of sitting naked apart from a pair of socks in my study for days and staring at a ceiling and sobbing as to why I'm a complete failure as a creative individual, which is an increasingly important part of the creative process, I think, for most creatives.
Well, that just answered my next question. So,
But yes, eventually and this is a giant preamble because I started thinking about what is it, and at that point I had written a book called Way of the Barefoot Zombie that was selling really, really well, and publishers were starting to ask me, can you do another horror book for us? And I was sort of thinking, what do I want to get typecast as? Like, right, I've written all these books, I've written science fiction books, I've written historical books, I've written World War II books, I've written dystopian books. And it suddenly occurred to me growing up as a kid, because I've written since I was about 5 years old, certainly from the age of about 12 onwards, all the short stories that I wrote, irrespective of the kind of breadth of things that I read, were actually all kind of horror. At the age of 14, the first novel I wrote, which obviously you don't finish because no one finishes a novel at 14 unless they're a genius. Sadly, I probably don't fall into that category. In spite of being grown in a vat, they kind of just got the DNA mix slightly wrong, and I just missed that genius mark. But never mind. What you going to do? I didn't finish a novel at 14, so sue me. No one would have read it anyway. But that was a horror novel. And it occurred to me that most of the things that I'd really enjoyed writing were horror. And all of the comic scripts that I'd written that were really, really successful were horror. And most of the things I probably wanted to say about the world were horror. And the great thing about horror was that on the one hand, I did genuinely want to write about the world around me. I did want to write about the human condition. I did want to write about the societal pressures that we face currently and where these societal pressures originate from, both in terms of the inherited trauma that we have from our history and also the state of the world which we've built. And on the other hand, I've got a slightly hallucinogenic, out of control imagination. I walk around in a psychedelic haze without taking any substances. So I could marry these two things together and let this wild imagination kind of go mad, which I have to in order to kind of maintain my sanity. I need a kind of place to control it, like a safe environment, a bit like a controlled explosion. But this will take place, on my computer screen, rather than kind of like me grabbing a semi-automatic rifle and kind of charging naked into my local Walmart. Neither of which actually is possible here in the UK, by the way, because one, we don't have Walmart stores, and two, you can't actually buy a semi-automatic rifle, which is a good thing. So I have to write horror fiction instead, which is probably would have been the much shorter answer, but
No, but this
that's
one was
how I
entertaining.
came. So, and it was yeah, having to face the terrifying prospect of thinking, well, what do I write and what is my voice, led me to discover the fact that what I write is hideous and my voice is terrifying.
You have so much room to write under horror to say the things that you want to say, but disguise it as this horror. There's so many subgenres out there. I love it.
No, I know, and all these little subgenres. I kind of like to crossbreed and cross-pollinate. I don't really see genre. And my problem often was is that I could write in a lot of different voices and write a lot of different things. And this, as a genre, you've got such a huge breadth because we kind of bump up against fantasy on one side and we bump up against crime on the other. And those kind of genres are always kind of running into our sandpit and stealing our toys. And it's like, it's not fair. It's a serial killer. I think, sorry, that's horror. No, give it back. And they never do. So,
Got to
but it does,
share to make a good story.
I know, but it does give us a lot of room. And also, it's kind of like people, if you ever you have a conversation with people in polite company, which occasionally I am allowed out in under supervision of my wife, a responsible adult. And people ask you what it is you do, and they get very excited when you tell them that you actually write for a living. Oh my gosh, what do you write? And then you happen to mention horror fiction, and you might as well have just said, I write about bestiality, and because immediately their mind goes to like ball gags and chainsaws and naked teenagers running through the woods with an axe with
Yeah.
a maniac chasing them, and they're like, oh dear, no, I don't really read that. Oh, sorry, there's something over there I have to go and do. Goodbye. Um,
There's so many things that are scary, and that's what kills me.
yeah.
I'm like, there's so many things, so many.
But
Besides
because of
that,
this, we have like an outsider status as a literary genre. We're not really allowed inside, even though they let science fiction and kind of crime into the kind of literary household. Horror still like hangs around on the porch, and occasionally we're kind of like allowed into kind of like the hallway, but then we're quickly ushered out again. So you can kind of get away with stuff that you can't get away with in other genres, I think, which is part of the appeal of it too. You can push the envelope. We live in a very, very scary world at the moment. Scarier than it's been at probably any point in my lifetime, and I'm no doubt yours and most people watching this. And so horror is one of the best ways of addressing that, but not just addressing what's going in the world, but also kind of taking all that free form anxiety and
and working through it in like a controlled space.
a safe space to kind of deal with it. And on the other hand as well, also, we are the people that are going to survive because we've been living in like post-apocalyptic dystopias for like the past 20 years. When we walk into a house and something kind of feels off and there's the basement door is swinging open, we do not go into the basement, walk down the stairs and saying, "Hello, is anyone there? I'm all by myself and completely unarmed." We go, "I've seen this scenario. I know every single way this was a." We get the hell out of there. We
Yeah.
live because we've been through this.
I'm
We
gonna
have.
go a couple of blocks over and call the cops.
Yeah. Because we've road tested every single survival like tactic and we've seen what works and what doesn't. We are the final girls because we've been reading up on this.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I guess that kind of leads me into a fun question. Besides your wife, clearly, where is your inspiration come from to write all of this horror and the world around you, clearly? Like when
Um
you were younger, what were you reading and watching?
oh heck. Well, I kind of grew up in the 1970s growing up in the UK. We had a lot of very weird stuff. It's kind of like referred to now as hauntology or like the scarred for life generation. Because we had like public information films which involve like small children being dragged into stagnant water by hooded monks. I'm seriously not joking you about this. Or kids would like throw a frisbee into like a power station and they'd climb over the line, and then you'd watch them kind of like fry like a piece of steak on a griddle as 5,000 volts went through. And this was going out right in the middle of our Saturday morning like cartoons. So
I mean, I guess it must have been effective.
yeah, I know. Well, we kind of lived, I guess. Um, yeah, and there was a lot of strange stuff. What was I reading? I kind of like discovered a very kindly uncle gave me a whole bunch of pulp magazines when I was about 8 years old. Although it was kind of perhaps not the best age appropriate reading material, I absolutely totally loved it. Um, I discovered Psycho at about 10, 11 years old in my local library and had to totally out argue the librarian and allow them to take it home and read it by Robert Bloch. And that totally blew my mind because I'd never seen the film. I had no idea about the surprise ending, and I totally fell in love with Robert Bloch's work. And then, but none of his work was really in print in the UK. The only place you could find it was in all those anthologies from the 60s, 70s, and then in the early 80s, which kind of came out. And there'd be one story by Robert Bloch, but they only cost like the British equivalent of a dime or a nickel. You could buy them for 5 or 10 pence. So that was what my pocket money went on. And because I was buying them literally for the Robert Bloch story, Robert Bloch would be anthologized alongside other kind of pulp aficionados like Clark Ashton Smith and H.P. Lovecraft and Seabury Quinn, and then slightly more contemporary authors like Ramsey Campbell and Lisa Tuttle. And so I began, that's how my education in early horror at a very, very seminal age began, buying these ancient crumbling anthologies, Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Um,
Listen, that's what I grew up on in the Ellery Queen magazines, like just whole boxes of stuff nobody wanted to read. And I'm like, okay.
yeah, yard sales and thrift stores were absolute gold mines, and that was why
Yes.
pour through all these books, and every now and again you get this absolute treasure, and some of them I still have, mainly because my mother was going to throw them all out, and I kind of like was forced to take them back, and then and as a small kid I used to smuggle books and kind of comics in, past my mum like under an overcoat as if they were porn, and I do the same thing with my wife. But this said, my wife is a complete bibliophile. I have no need to hide these things from her. I think it's just the fun of smuggling into the house as though it's contraband.
Listen, I buy books all the time, 100% my own money, but sometimes I'm just like waiting at the door, sneaking it in, like, opening it. I'm like, who are you hiding this from?
I know. Other people kind of like hide shoes or kind of like clothes at the back and then pretend they've had them for years. I do that with books. No. That's not. That was published like 10 years ago. I had this Ballsman on my
It's
shelf.
old, old. I got a deal.
Yeah. My wife's an avid reader too. I couldn't be married to someone who wasn't a bibliophile, so I've got no reason to do that.
What have been some of your favorite recent movies and books that have come out? And
Oh,
by
that's
recent, it could literally be the last 5 years. So,
oh gosh. I absolutely love the work of Michelle Paver, who did Dark Matter and Wakenhurst, which is absolutely effing awesome. And Cold Air as well, which I just read recently, which is absolutely superb. I'm currently reading King Sorrow by Joe Hill, though I've had to stop it in the middle to read an arc by a friend of mine, a fellow writer called Weldon Burge, and his work Enter Vengeance, which I've almost finished. But I was loving those two books. Just read Coffin Moon by Keith Rosson, which I really enjoyed. First time I read one of his books, and then weirdly, for some bizarre reason, they're no longer in print in the UK. So I have to kind of, I know, to, and you can't get them on like Kindle or Kobo or Apple Books, unfortunately. Why, I don't know. Something to do with Penguin Random House, who knows? Really enjoyed that. Um, really like Laura Purcell as well. Is a writer that I really like. She did Silent Companions, and again, which are not really strange, dark, gothic works, which I really enjoyed. And Jennifer McMahon as well, who's quite gentle, but and it's very character-based horror. I love listening to her audiobooks. Um, so I guess I've mainly spoken about books. Comics is why I read a lot of horror comics. Recently read Bowling for Corpses by Mike Mignola, who's famous for doing Hellboy. And he's got this giant universe he created with all these Hellboy characters, and they all spawned their own titles. And it's difficult to kind of keep up with them all. But then for some reason, he's just decided I'm kind of getting bored with this giant, incredibly successful franchise I've run that's had multiple films and hundreds of
let's do something else.
yeah, and he's done this thing called Bowling for Corpses, which is it's part like strange fable, part weird mythology, and part like 1970s like DC House of Mystery style, all
Ooh.
weirdly mixed together. And that just sounds like it will work, but because it's Mike Mignola, it just works beautifully. And he's an absolute master. Comics themselves are a form of language. And they're a language that kind of unites the left and the right sides of the brain, which process visual and literal information. And the comic page takes these together and actually activates both sides. And if you read comics from an early age, it's you learn a certain language that it's harder sometimes for adults who come to them later on in life to pick up on. But nobody has mastered like the comic format like Mike Mignola has. Um, Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees by Patrick Horvath is another superb graphic novel that I'd massively recommend. It's kind of a bit like if somebody took the Berenstain Bears and the Sylvanian families style setting, and then had the lead character, who was a big bear, a female bear, called Samantha, is basically like Patrick Bateman, but she lives in a small, tiny little town and runs the local hardware store, and she has these impulses she has to deal with. She's a fine pillar of the community on one hand, but on the other hand, she's murdering all these like small furry animals, chopping them up,
So,
and burying their bodies in paint cans in the middle of the woods beneath the trees where nobody sees. That's a superb because it's like the disjunction between the kind of two is just and
not everything is as it seems.
no, and it's like you've got this incredibly off the scale gory splatterpunk story, but it's all like furry animals. It's just a bit like and he does it brilliantly, and it makes the horror that much more visceral for the setting. Equally as well, there's another writer called Jay Stevens who's done a comic series called Dwellings. That's a six-part series, and that's just a work of genius. It's some of the best horror it is in comic form that I've read, and he draws the whole thing in the style of Richie Rich and Casper the Friendly Ghost, the old Gold Key comics. But they are the most messed up stories I've read in years. They're kind of slightly just as messed up as if you read manga. Junji Ito, who did like all the titles have suddenly got on my head. I can read
I know
Toad,
my best friend is going to
Toad
yell
and
at me
Mackie
when
and
she
Geo.
watches this.
Yes. But so can I imagine something like set in a mythical Canadian town that he's made up, which is as messed up and as kind of weird as Junji Ito, but drawn like Richie Rich and Casper the Friendly Ghost. And again, it's like the whole juxtaposition of these styles and subject matter is just incredible. And Jay Stevens again is another superb writer artist. So I guess just off the top of my head, burbling away, those are some of the things that I've read that have absolutely blown me away. Sinners was a superb movie. The Current Bride of Frankenstein was effing awesome. Weapons was fantastic. I love anything also by Ari Aster and Robert Eggers, two superb artists. I loved Them, which was a recent Prime Video series. And Jordan Peele as well. Anything that he directs, I'm there. And on the opposite side as well, kind of the slightly less kind of like arty side of like horror. All of the Terrifier movies have been superb. And I actually I watched the first little segment because it was part of one of those anthology horror movies. So the first appearance of Art the Clown wasn't played by the current guy who's playing him, his name which I've completely forgotten. Um, that was also superb. And so the development over the kind of 3.5 movies, soon to be 4.5 movies, has been superb.
Very good. Next up, out of all of the books that you have written, what do you think your favorite is? Not the favorite of everybody else, not the most popular one, the one that you truly think that you love the most. If
Ah,
you have one, maybe
yeah,
you haven't written it yet.
yeah. It's interesting. Because I used to answer that my favorite book is the one I'm writing for, and this was one of those annoying things where uh, um, the minute you start saying something, suddenly everybody else starts saying it. So it suddenly stopped being original. And I had all these authors saying the same thing. Same thing used to happen when you were a comedian. You'd come up with a joke entirely independently. And then suddenly I did a gig one time I spoke about have you always noticed how if you ever drop a piece of like buttered toast, it always lands butter side up. And if you drop a cat, it always lands on its feet. So if you were to tie a piece of buttered toast to the back of a cat and drop it, you'd have like a perpetual motion engine. They'd be like, both sides would be trying to drop. And This got a laugh, and I was at a gig with another comedian overly well, and he went, "Have you ever noticed if you drop a piece of toast, it always lands buttered side down?" I thought, no, he's not gonna. And he did. He went, and the cat always, and I was like, no. Afterwards, I sort of said, "Where did you get that joke?" Because I've been saying that joke and we're working it out. And I actually trusted him enough to say he had literally thought of it independently of me. And then about a month later, he phoned me up and said, "Have you seen this show?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, this comedian who was slightly better known than both of us has just done our joke." And it was like, so obviously everybody had this joke at the same time. So I'm kind of avoiding your question because I used to say, well, it's the novel I'm working on because I haven't messed that up yet. But then every author started saying that. They all stole it from me. It's really annoying. But they do, so I kind of can't use that question anymore. And again, every author sort of will say, "Well, it's like choosing my favorite child." And and every parent says, "I don't have any favorite child. I love them all exactly the same." But if you ever raised like children to adulthood, you kind of you have a favorite. Well, basically, your kids know when they're your favorite child because when one has like just crashed the car like into your living room, then they're not your favorite child. And suddenly your other delinquent child who's been like smoking dope could not behave better. It's like, ah, my child's to be favorite child. Um, so anyway, I and they kind of fill that void. Suddenly, like the one who was on off to like the nice Ivy League college gets pregnant, drops out, and joins an ashram, and the other kid who was like washing cars at the kind of topless car wash suddenly gets a scholarship. So
They're all your favorite at a certain point in time, otherwise you wouldn't have wrote them.
exactly. So I don't know which is my favorite book. I don't really have one. People, it is interesting because I do people. have favorite books, and I write quite different books, and I don't seem to be able to write the same book again. And even when I wrote a trilogy, which was exactly the same story, it was effectively like a very large novel that I had to split into three books. Even then, the story kind of changed like three times or three or four times. Living, I can't write the same book. So some people they really love one of my books and they're constantly badgering, why didn't you write that again? That was brilliant. Do that again. I want more books like that. And I seem to be incapable of writing the same book twice. So uh, yeah, I don't know what my favorite work is.
How about this then? Tell me about your last book, or tell us about your last book.
That and strangely enough, here's one I prepared earlier. My which is been out for a couple of months now. Harmed and Dangerous. It is a Southern Gothic paranormal thriller that's set in the deep south of Louisiana. Which, given my accent, you can obviously work out I know loads about the deep south, coming UK. But I absolutely adore Southern Gothic writing from writers like Eudora Welty and Flannery O'Connor through to Michael McDowell and Donald Ray Pollack and William Gray. Absolutely adore it as a genre. This is set, my main protagonist is a 17-year-old girl called Kyra Hughes. Who comes to a tiny little town in the Bayous, in the St. Martin's parish, um, to search for the birth parents that she never knew. Um, Particularly when she discovers that the birth mother that she didn't know about, that she'd been looking for ages, was actually murdered by her favorite serial killer because she's an absolute true crime buff. And growing up as a small kid, when other kids had like K-pop stars and My Little Pony up on the wall, she had John Wayne Gacy and Jeffrey Dahmer. Um,
Moving on.
don't we all? Yeah, well, she did. And her favorite serial killer is a very lesser known kind of like indie bad boy that hardly anyone knows about, quite obscure, called Billy Ray Johnson. And she's obsessed with him. And then eventually she discovers that he murdered her birth mother. Her mental health isn't great anyway, for lots of reasons which are explored in the novel. And so she has a complete psychotic break and decides to take off to the small town of Yeovil, runs away from home, drops out of high school, and goes looking for answers. And when she gets to Yeovil, she finds that it's a very strange, extremely remote town where everyone keeps the old ways, but no one quite tells you what these old ways are. There's just very strange statues and totems and altars all over the place in people's cars, in the little juju bags they carry around their necks at crossroads, in doctors' waiting rooms and offices and garages and small industrial units. And while she's there, she begins to undergo a very strange series of episodes. It begins, her vision completely disappears, and when it reappears, the world around her has changed. She's seeing the world as it was 15 years ago to the moment she's actually in. So physically, her body is in the present. Everything she sees or feels is what's happening now, but everything she sees is what happened exactly 15 years ago. And a strange presence takes it over and forces her to move where it moves and see what it sees. She walks past a window that's with a and sees her reflection and realizes she's looking through the eyes of Billy Ray Johnson, the serial killer who murdered her birth mother, and she's being forced to watch as he stalks and then murders her birth mother and even herself as a young 18-month-old child in a baby stroller, and there is nothing she can do to stop him because he died by lethal injection over a decade ago.
It's horrifying, but sounds exciting.
Oh. Hopefully. And weirdly, it is a book. It deals with LGBTQIA themes, and it looks in great depth at father-daughter relationships, which is something, having raised two amazing human beings to adulthood, that I know quite a lot about. And my both daughters are some of my best friends and most formidable allies.
Oh, that's so nice.
I'm very lucky. I raised two absolutely kick-ass, totally different, utterly Amazonian, like uh, amazing human beings.
That is very cool. And I mean, that is a really good thing to have on your resume, basically. You know what I mean?
It is one of the few things of which I can kind of be proud of.
Where did you get your inspiration for the story? Is it something that you just had like a little idea of and grew it into this? Do you plot? Do you plan? Just wing it?
Um, can I go through that story like in bits? Because
Yes.
a few parts of
Oh,
that.
absolutely.
Initially, I had the idea back in 2010. I was invited by Shelley Bond, who was a DC editor, who at that point ran the Vertigo line, which was where comics like The Sandman, Doom Patrol, Preacher were all. She invited me to pitch ideas for a mini series of comics, and I was over at the New York Comic Con as a very minor guest. And I went up to see him at DC offices and sort of like sat there, um, like freaking out and trying to be there as a complete professional. I'm like in the house of like Batman and Superman.
You're like throwing up. It's fine.
Well, I'm kind of trying to be like, well, I might have a better time about this, and secretly my kind of like inner 12-year-old kid is just like going, oh. Um, but I pitched a whole bunch of ideas and in these situations and they're like no 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 and I'd been listening to a song by the Adverts called Looking Through Gary Gilmore's Eyes, and so I kind of just was spitballing and pitched this idea out, and this piqued her interest and she said, okay, that does sound quite good, okay, write that up for me as a series. And I worked on it with her for a little while, but then this was the end days for Vertigo. They shut down the line, and unfortunately, they moved Shelley out of her job before I had actually written this series to her for her. And it's called like an orphan project when you're working with an editor or a publisher. The editor leaves, and no other editor wants to pick up your work. And this was like my first work for a big US publisher. I had worked for like smaller indie publishers, but nothing of the size of DC Comics, nothing that mainstream. So I was then moved the project as a comic through various different publishers, and publishing is a torturous thing. Lots of people showed interest. Nobody coughed up the money for me to write it, and employed an artist to draw it. Various artists were attached to the project and kind of came and went. And it eventually occurred to me, I was having a conversation with one of my daughters when they were still in teen age years and still living at home, and I told them the idea for the story, and they were like, "Dad, why haven't you written that as a book?" Um, and it kind of occurred to me, I'd also been wanting to write a story about father-daughter relationships for a long time, because parenthood, particularly while I was raising kids, and I was like the primary carer for my kids because I was at home writing and my wife was out supporting us all, keeping me from destitution. So I kind of had to do like all the other stuff, um, as you do. And that was a privilege. No, really, it was. And so a lot of my work kind of like around about that period was looking at the dark side of parenting. I think probably just as a way to kind of get rid of all these intrusive thoughts that you have to stop, breathe. No, it's all right. I'm sure I can buy a new television set, and just because they've burnt down the rest of the house doesn't mean I should raise my voice. Um, but I wanted to kind of write about it from a wider basis, and it suddenly occurred to me this idea that I'd had would marry very nicely, and both my daughters were like, "Write that as a book," and it was one of those books where I kept going back to it, kept writing it, would write a draft, it wasn't right, I would put it to one side, and then another book would come in, and I'd write another book, and I probably wrote about five other novels while I was writing, between which I was writing drafts of Harmed and Dangerous. And with regards to whether I plot or I pants, because I started out as a very commercial writer, in order to sell a book to people or a novel or a script of any sort, usually you have to hand in like a full treatment. You have to work it all out, beat by beat, scene by scene, and hand it in to whomever's going to commission you so they can commission you. So when I started writing for myself, I kind of carried that over. So I was something of a plotter. Um, but some stories do not want to be plotted. you kind of sit down and you go, okay, so I've got this character, and the story is like, write me, mother fluffer. I'm like, what? Write me. And you're just like, no, no, Bacchus, no, write me. And they will tell you. It's all right. They've got it all worked out. It will come to you, and sometimes you'll have a block. So that you go away, and do whatever it is you do to get over your block. Um, choke, whatever you have to choke, drink or toke, whatever you have to toke. And eventually the story will come back to you. And so what I've actually discovered over the years, although there's supposed to be this giant kind of great divide, almost like a culture war between plotters and pantsers. The plotters are like, no man, I need to work it all out. And the pantsers are like, how can you do that? It's just, you're ruining a story by working it out in advance. And it was like, secretly, the pantsers have all had like a major project go down the pan because they've gotten to the end and they can't end it. They don't know how to end it, and the ending sucks, or they just stall and the story never continues. And plotters, it's like if you work too many things out in advance, you choke all of the spontaneity and the fun out of it. If it just so you need the story to surprise you. So plotters start pantsing more and more and more. Just a bit like there's whole bits of the story that just might have an ending, or they might have or they work out a few things, a few chapters in advance, and so just a bit of spontaneity creeps in. And pantsers secretly, they have to have a few story beats they can go to, things they know they're going to, things that it's got to be worked out in advance because the story sometimes just doesn't flow. So we all kind of like move into the middle. And I started out as a plotter. um, I have to pants a lot. And some stories, the novel I'm writing at the moment, it's incredibly effing aggravating because I can't work it out in advance. It's become quite a major work, and it's a pure act of faith. Whereas things like the next novel I'm going to be writing, um, it's so complex. There are so many moving parts, a bit like the Draw You In trilogy. I have to have them all pinned down. There will be lots of areas in which the story will surprise me, and I'll leave gaps for it to do that. But I have to kind of build the entire infrastructure before I can kind of start bringing it to life. So it's entirely dependent. Harmed and Dangerous, I think I worked it out several times in advance, and the plot changed several times, and the characters came to life, and the characters were not the characters I thought they were going to be. They all kind of surprised me. I didn't know when I sat down I was writing like my big gay horror book, but it was like all my characters kind of turned gay, and it was a bit like, huh? Um, so it was a bit like, yeah, well, I mean, given my own proclivities, I suppose I would be part of the LG, kind of the B in the LGBTQIA or the P or whatever. Um, uh, um, it stands to reason I would kind of write about that, but it did kind of surprise me in various different reads, how all these characters were and the views that they held about various different things all took me by surprise, even though I had a rough idea of the whole story structure. And they would keep pushing in opposite directions. You'd have to kind of go, well, it's your story, so I kind of have to let you go where you want to go.
Do you ever fight with character deaths? Like you're like, okay, this character is going to have to die, and you just really don't wanna, or are you just like, you know what, it's your time.
No, I get very certain characters. I get very, very, very upset. My third novel was called Dawn Over Doomsday, and my favorite character in that, I realized had to die. And it was coming to a scene, and I realized like, shit, this character is going to die, and that's changing everything I'd worked out in advance, and I hadn't told my publisher, but this character did have to die, and they died very well. It was a fabulous death that they had, and I was very proud of them, but it really hurt, And I went away and had a bit of a cry and poured myself a whiskey, and you feel like you want to apologize to them. I'm so sorry. That's horrible. And it was recently one reviewer said that I do like to put my poor characters through the ringer. I hadn't really thought about it, but occasionally I kind of do. It, no one gets out of any of my novels unscathed, really. There's a fabulous quote by Sam Raimi, who's one of my favorite directors, and I once wrote a huge retrospective about his work. He had three laws for basically making a horror film, which was the guilty must be punished, The innocent must suffer, and you must taste blood to be a man. But we'll kind of make that less gender specific. Let's just say a human being. Um, and I think maybe that kind of got ingrained right at the back of my mind because I do seem to put them through it, and I do sometimes feel like I want to apologize because some of them don't survive my books, and I kind of get to the end and I think there is a slight. I remember there's a quote by Stephen King talking about Creepshow, and he said that Creepshow comics are moral comics, and I think there should be a kind of a I like a slight moral underpinning to a lot of my work. So a lot of the characters that die, particularly in like the Draw You In trilogy, a lot of the characters that die in that, particularly in the little interludes, they are horrible, hideous people, and I kind of made them really hideous. And I looked at the things I really didn't like. That were going on like in the publishing and the comics community, and I purposefully put those people in so that the incredibly disgusting things that happened to them kind of felt vaguely justified. They brought that on themselves.
Interesting. I like that. I like that. Let's see. Two more questions, and I'm going to ask the serious
Yeah.
one first, and then we'll end with the fun one. So, serious one. If you passed on some wisdom to some authors that are just starting out, what do you think it would be?
Um, Very practical advice. We live in an age of endless distraction. We're surrounded by, with the rise of AI, the whole purpose of AI is basically that we outsource all of our thinking to machines. And they produce mediocre slop as a result of this. So AI is all over the place. Sort of, it's like my every time I pick up my phone, my children will take it out of my hands because it's just painful to watch somebody my age attempt to kind of navigate that technology. And AI is now doing that. It's like, let me do that for you. And AI is only the kind of the worst of it. It's very, very because the other thing that phones are basically doing to is they everybody has now developed a form of ADD or ADHD, and I'm not making light of that condition or anyone who lives with it by any means, but latest tests and results have shown that we are way too distractible, and there's a lot of benefits that come with being neurodiverse. It opens up a whole world of talents and possibilities that we're only just now beginning to understand that it's not actually a disorder, it's a purposeful evolutionary branch. But there are drawbacks, and all of these drawbacks are being simulated by our relationship with technology. So my advice is every single time you sit down to write, turn off every notification on every device you've got around you. But basically, your life will improve hugely if you turn them off for good. But I appreciate some people can't do that. But do put your phone on silent, turn off every single potential notification. Go into your like settings, turn off all notifications. Do the same thing on your laptop, do the same thing on your tablet, any other device on your phone. If you've got like an Apple phone or a smartphone, a smart watch of some sort, everything. Because those things are the whole basis of them is they are training you so that you will, in a Pavlovian fashion, you will respond. They are effectively stealing your time and your attention. And the one thing, the thing that the two resources a writer needs more than anything else are time and attention. We never seem to have enough of those. And so anything that steals that from you has to be stamped on viciously. So turn off all notifications. Um, Possibly unplug your router unless you desperately need to surf the net, as I often do, for research. So that's a very hugely practical piece of advice. And you might think this is coming from like the 19th century, but really, it will improve your writing in ways you haven't yet guessed. I absolutely promise you. So
No,
that
I think it's great. I love technology, but when I'm writing my reviews, no notifications are gone, silenced, everything, because otherwise, what am I doing besides scrolling?
yeah, exactly. And it's so easy, and we all do it. I'm the reason I'm suggesting it. I'm not pretending I'm a more advanced person. I'm the first person in the world to check all kinds of. That's why I don't have social media on my phone because it's so addictive.
Easy.
And I'm, just prey to it as anyone else. So, and yeah, when you write as well, it's a little bit kind of like sleep patterns over like because we have two sleep cycles usually during the night over roughly 4 hours at a time. And in amongst that 4 hours, there's about half an hour of really, really deep sleep. And apparently, you kind of have like two of those half an hours within the two sleep cycles. And each one of those, that's where all of the incredibly important, essential, recuperative things that sleep gives you take place during those half hours. And that's really the kind of absolute golden point of your sleep cycles that you want to aim at. And when you're writing, roughly, you kind of it's almost like writing like in 4 hour cycles as well. What you're trying to do is put yourself into a trance. And again, this is kind of to go back to like neurodiverse like mindsets. You are trying to train your brain to fall into hyper focus. And it is almost like falling into a trance. And when you fall into that hyper focus, that's when you write 3/4 of your daily like word count, and it only lasts for about half an hour, and then you kind of break out of it, and you can keep yourself at your thing typing away, but you just have to keep kind of forcing yourself not to look at your bookshelf, make a cup of tea. Oh, there's that oven need cleaning. The only time you'll think that is when you're in the middle of
I've baked 3 loaves of bread. It's
yeah, all just so no, right. And then so you need to kind of try getting yourself into those states, just hyper focus. And when you are in those, seriously, your child can run into your study in flames, and you'll be like, "Sorry, did you say something, darling?"
can you hold off 20 more minutes?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Also, if you live with a writer, don't think you can come into their study and go, "Could you just help me with this?" And you're like, "I'm just in the middle of." No, no, it only take 5 minutes. It won't take 5 minutes. It's taken me 3 hours to get into that hyper productive state. If I break now, it's another 3 hours till I get back here. And that's most of my work for the
It's
day.
like you missed your times, you missed your mark. It's like when you were in, or well, when
Yeah,
I was in school studying, I'm like, well, I gotta wait another 10 minutes. I missed the mark.
exactly.
Oh goodness, that is really good advice though. So thank you for that. And the last fun question: if you were stranded on a deserted island and you could only have one book, and that's the only book you could ever read again, over and over again, what would it be?
Um, that's a good question. I think it would have to be like something like the golden treasury of every book ever written. You get Paul Graves like 1001 like best novels. Uh,
One of those big, big, big ones.
big, 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 super big ones with tiny little print, which I would stare, squint at the page and read, like a giant tome, with hundreds of books in it. I think that's a bit of
I'm
uh,
always just like, I would take an e-reader that never dies.
See, that's what I would do. You could always kind of like hook it up to like a little build yourself a little electric motor, driven by like a
If you're on
turtle
an island,
with
there might
a
be
pedal.
citrus. I think that can be used, or some potatoes. I mean, I've seen so many videos.
Yeah. Or the collected works of somebody who wrote hundreds of books, like Stephen King has written, I don't know, 8,000 novels or something, hasn't he?
So many.
So his, I mean, I've read most of them already. But yeah, that probably would have to be like a giant anthology or kind of collected works would probably be what I would want to read. Um, do you reread many books? I know authors, some people like have like comfort books they have to keep going back to, and
Yes,
they
I
read.
do. I do.
So, yeah.
The Dark Tower, I will read a couple of times a year, and the Threshold series by Peter Clines,
Hmm. Oh
a couple
wow,
of
I
times a
haven't
year.
read that one. In fact, actually, I haven't read Peter Cline's yet. He keeps popping up on my radar. Is he worth? Is it the Threshold series I should be reading, or? He wrote one called
He
Number
has
Four.
a couple of other things which he likes, but the threshold ones are it's like weird cosmic horror, but like I don't know, it's just so good.
Okay, I'll have to go and check those out.
Definitely. But
I
yeah.
certainly love the Dark Tower series. I don't really, I haven't actually reread many books. Weirdly, I think I reread Pet Cemetery by Stephen King. I read it when it first came out, and I was 12 or 13 years old. So it had a completely different effect when I read it as a kind of like a middle-aged man who'd like had kids. Although, and the other weird thing was rereading it again. It was almost kind of like reliving memories. So I could kind of remember more or less every scene in the book when I reread it and thought, wow. Um, and even stuff that I'd thought I'd forgotten was kind of like. So obviously the book had a huge effect on me, and I think also when I reread it, I'd actually written a few books by that point as well. So I kind of had an idea about, when you're in the company of somebody who is, and forgive me if you don't like Stephen King, but um, the more you write as an author, the more you become aware of how good somebody is when they really know what they're doing because you know what it takes to get there. Um, there's a lot of his work. That you kind of almost feel like you kind of you take off your invisible cap, kind of like in respect. It's like, wow, this guy really knows what he's doing.
Needful Things is actually my deserted island book, the one that I would take and read over and over again. It's so big. There's a million characters and everybody's messy.
It's got one of my favorite scenes because one of the things Stephen King, like occasionally just gets really unnecessarily vicious and nasty, and it's got that fantastic duel between the two old like nags, and it's one of the best moments in any one of his novels. Um, uh, because of all the build up to it, because of the apotheosis of the characters, and because these two old ladies hacking the shit out of each in the
Yes.
street. It's just wow. It's perfect.
Like, you know, when you see those questions going around, people are like, what's a character that you hate more than anybody else? It's Wilma Jesnek, one of those ladies. Like, if I met her in real life, I would square up with her. Like, absolutely.
So yeah, it has the thing of like, oh, I so wanted this. You could not have written a more perfect scene. How many times have you fantasized about that with a character you don't like? Um,
Yeah,
and yet, so that's yeah, I really like Needful Things as well, I have to say.
very good one. Um,
Not as bad as it could have been as well, either, actually. Not a bad film. It's not,
it
nobody was.
wasn't a bad film, but is any movie as good as the book that came before it? I don't think I'd ever be as happy. Books
Um,
always give you all the extra information that the movie ends up having to leave out. So,
yeah, usually, I have to say, and again, forgive me because I'm slightly going to say something intensely heretical here, but I did like the Lord of the Rings movies more than the book. Didn't I did read the book as a kind of as an awkward and precocious teen, and it was okay. And I
I
hated the
didn't
character.
read or watch them because it just was like, I don't know, never was a fan. And people love it, and that's great. But I'm just like,
Yeah, I'm not, but I did quite enjoy the films, and it was one of those weird things. It was like one of the few occasions where I thought this film is actually better than the book.
I
Um,
always joke that you only like somebody only gets one long-winded favorite author that they can read, and like Stephen King already took that space for me, so I need everybody else to wrap it up.
and I'm not and people can tear me down, and I am entirely aware of how incredibly important and influential J.R. Tolkien is, and I loved The Hobbit as a little kid. The Lord of the Rings never did it for me. There's a horrible character in it called Tom Bombadil, and it turns out that apparently he's kind of like the hidden god within the whole thing, and he's just the worst character in the whole of literature ever. Kind of like, those awkward, like, kind of stupid uncles who kind of like
Yes.
wear like stupid hats and turn up and always say slightly inappropriate things and kind of they know all the words to every Monty Python song ever written and want to sing it at you, beyond the point where it kind of your buttocks are kind of aching with the kind of cringe of them. Just this character was actually turned into this person was turned into a character in the middle of, and he wanders into a pub for no apparent reason and starts singing these really stupid songs. And it's just the most cringy moment ever in literature. The appearance of Tom Bombadil. And I put down the book even at like 12 years old because I couldn't read it. It was like, oh my God, this is so hideous. And I forced myself to go back. It's like, please, 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 don't make this character come back. And he does come back. And then online, like years, kind of like only about 6 months ago, I kind of read that apparently he's the most important character in the whole of Tolkien. The worst character in literature ever.
Don't you
Um,
love that?
secretly, he's God. And it's like, I could just about stomach and swallow that Aslan was Christ. And that kind of, the more I thought about it, I thought, no, that kind of adds like a nice little spiritual underpin to these books about Narnia. And I still really enjoy those. And I read those about the same time I read The Hobbit. But no, I could not stomach Tom Bombadil. Sorry if he's your favorite character. Um, and they left him out of the films, and apparently the people are livid about this. There's whole communities of people that burn like Peter Jackson's like image in effigy. How dare you do that to Tom Bombadil? The worst character in literature. Sorry, but he is.
Hilarious, and great. Is there anything else you want to talk about that we haven't hit on?
Can I do some egregious plugs? Harmed and Dangerous is out in shops. I also have a novella, which is like a splatter western called Dead Scalp, which is hideous. It is the weirdest western you've ever read, and it really is absolutely unspeakably hideous. And I also have a trilogy of books called Draw You In. If you like shows like Black Mirror or The X-Files, if you like weird mind-bending fiction, if you love horror comics, if you love secret histories, if you love conspiracies which explain everything, you'll absolutely adore the Draw You In trilogy.
Where can everybody follow you to get the most up-to-date information?
I have a mailing list which you could sign up for if you go to my website, www.jasperbark.com. Spend a bit of time there because there's all kinds of like fascinating things. I had a fabulous web agency build that for me. And that's a lovely interactive thing. But you can sign up there for my mailing list. You can check me out most places on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Zitter, X as it is now, Twitter as it used to be. I'm also on Threads and Blue Sky. I'm relatively active on all of those platforms. Please hit me up. I'm on Goodreads as well. Let's be friends there and swap book recommendations. Absolutely love that. And but yeah, check out my website. I also do like a regular show for the House of Shadows and Ink, which is my publisher's kind of like YouTube channel. It's called Bark Bites Comics. I have like a little imprint within called Bark Bites Horror, which is kind of like my own little imprint within my general publisher Crystal Lakes thing. Check that out online. It's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, direct from my publisher's website, direct for me if you'd like a signed exclusive copy with lots of exclusive merch.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here and talking to me. This was so fun.
It was loads and loads of fun. I'm so glad we got to do it because I'm a big fan of your work, and I think it's good Lord. It's been at least 6 months we've been trying to plan this, probably longer.
A million years, like we said.
Keep missing each other.